Petition to summon Russian citizen Putin as a witness. The accusations against the Russian Orthodox Church of the Tsarist Empire are directly related to the Jews. This circumstance is confirmed by the expert opinion of religious scholar Silantiev, in which, when answering the question, "Is the activity of the Russian Orthodox Church of the Tsarist Empire associated with encouraging citizens to refuse to fulfill their civic duties and to commit illegal acts?" Page 32 of the conclusion. The supposed religious scholar gave a positive answer, pointing out that the Russian Orthodox Church of the Tsarist Empire calls for the cleansing of the Russian land from its Jewish enemies. This is a direct and specific accusation against us that we are calling on believers to defend our church and our homeland against the Jews. But the so-called expert didn't explain what this call consists of and didn't reveal anything at all on this issue. In our previous petitions, we explained that by Jewish enemies, the Russian Orthodox Church of the Tsarist Empire means the Jewish sect Chabad Lubavitch, which has a very strong influence on the authorities in the Russian Federation and in many other countries of the world. We repeat once again and bring to your attention that the enemies of God and our entire Russian homeland are precisely the fascism of Chabad, the establishment and spread of which in the Russian Federation would be impossible without the direct participation and approval of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Since the beginning of his presidency, Putin has patronized the Chabad Jews, legalizing their fascist activities in the Russian constitution and providing them with protection through other laws. For example, the law on freedom of conscience and religious associations, dated September 26, 1997, number 125, FZ, the law on extremist activity, number 114 FZ of July 25, 2002. As the head of the Russian Federation, he shapes the direction of the state's domestic and foreign policy and directly influences all spheres of public relations. Without his personal involvement, no law can be passed, and today, according to these laws, anyone who denounces this Jewish fascism, which is precisely what we are against, becomes a criminal, despite the formal declaration of human rights in the Constitution of the Russian Federation. Therefore, Putin, as the person who created and promoted Jewish fascism and who has all the authority to stop it, must be questioned about this matter. Let us explain this in more detail. According to the Constitution, the recognition, observance and protection of human and civil rights and freedoms is the duty of the state, Article 2 of the Constitution. The rights and freedoms of persons and citizens are directly applicable. They determine the meaning, content and application of laws, the activities of the legislative and executive branches, local self-government, and are ensured by the judiciary, Article 18 of the Constitution. The President of the Russian Federation is the guarantor of the Constitution of the Russian Federation and the rights and freedoms of persons and citizens, Article 80, Part 2 of the Constitution. Based on the above provisions of the Constitution, the state is obliged to recognize and protect human rights and freedoms, and the President, as the guarantor of the Constitution, is responsible for its observance. According to the law on freedom of Conscious and Religious Associations dated September 26, 1997, number 125 FZ, Judaism is considered a religion that forms an integral part of the historical heritage of the peoples of Russia. That is, a traditional religion. President Vladimir Putin has repeatedly confirmed this fact in his speeches. However, there are several branches of Judaism: conservative, liberal, orthodox, and so on. Judging by the fact that Rabbi Berel Lazar, a member of the ultra-Orthodox Jewish organization Chabad, was chosen as the chief rabbi of Russia. The traditional religion of Judaism refers specifically to this Chabad Lubavitch movement, which, according to many researchers and experts, broke away from traditional Judaism and degenerated into a separate religion. The vast majority of representatives of Judaism in Russia represents this particular religious movement of Judaism, despite the fact that many Jews who also profess Judaism have a negative attitude towards this religious group, Chabad Lubavitch, as confirmed by the well-known Jewish public figure, writer, publicist, researcher of the Chabad sect and former head of the Kharkiv Jewish community, E. Kodos, in the video «Окна Шнирсона» или «Все дело в шляпе. Материалы к славянскому трибуналу». The Window of Schneerson, or It's All in the Hat. Materials for the Slavic Tribunal, where he quotes the words of Yaakov Kedmi, Israeli statesman and diplomat. On the radio Aurora, Yaakov Kedmi not only called Chabad a sect, but also defined its place on the sidelines of world religious and political Jewry and distanced it as much as possible from Israel. The doctrinal book of this organization is called Likutei Amarim, or Tanya. Several independent expert analyses of this book were conducted by philosophers, religious scholars, linguists, lawyers, and psychologists. According to these reviews, the book Tanya reveals that the Chabad movement hides a misanthropic secret doctrine of seizing power behind the screen of religion, and in essence it is true racism, fascism, and extremism. The book Tanya states, the souls of non-Jews and their physical existence originate from the rest, completely impure klipot, in which there is absolutely no good. The book then explains that klipot, evil demonic forces, and sitra akra, evil, are called vomit and excrement. The souls of all other peoples are subject to their influence and originate from them. Likutei Amarim, or Tanya, page 61. According to the teachings set forth in the book Tanya, Chabad Jews consider one race to be chosen and others to be impure, calling for their destruction. The Tanya preaches hatred towards people who are not members of this religious group, other nations, and sinners, non-religious group Jews. A quote from the Tanya: the perfect righteous man hates the side of evil, Sitra Akra. For his love for God and holiness is great. The stronger his love for God, the stronger his hatred for Sitra Akra and his aversion to evil. Part 1, Chapter 10, page 75-77. According to the teachings of the Chabad sect, a perfect righteous person must hate the side of evil Sitra Akra and its derivatives, including the world in which we live, and the stronger his love for God, the stronger his hatred for this world must be. Since, according to Tanya's assertions, the peoples of the world are equated with absolute evil, it follows that the hatred of Tanya's righteous person must extend to the peoples of the world. well-known public figure, writer, journalist, researcher of the Chabad sect and former head of the Kharkiv Jewish community, Eduard Kodos, writes, according to Tanya, the apotheosis of world history for the Chabadniks is the destruction of all life on earth, with the exception of millions of Jews' soul sparks, which will begin the process of eternal hovering over the deserted land. This is confirmed by the plan of the Jewish of the Chabad-Lubavitch sect to destroy the Russian Slavs, announced by their leader, the 7th Lubavitcher Rebbe Schneerson in 1994. The official publication of the text of the speech was printed in the newspaper Slavyanin number 4, page 32, 2001, Vologda. Quote, we will ensure the complete prosperity of our nationalism, Zionism, or more precisely Jewish fascism, which in its secrecy and power is super-fascism. Despite such statements, the fascist ideology of the Chabad sect has become a traditional religion in the Russian Federation. This is not an unfounded assertion, but a fact confirmed by an expert analysis of the Jewish teachings of Chabad conducted by Russian scholars, as well as a detailed examination of the activities of the leader of the Chabad-Lubavitch movement, Schneerson, who said of himself that they were super-fascists and that Hitler was a stupid boy compared to them. The conclusions of independent experts indicate that Chabad is a sect of criminals, fascists, racists, and Satanists who consider non-Jews to be animals that, according to the Talmud and Tanya, can be killed, robbed, and raped. The teachings of Chabad are clearly ultra-fascist, and putting them into practice amounts to genocide against all of humanity. This Chabad ideology is legalized in Article 28 and 29 of the Constitution. Article 28 states that everyone is guaranteed freedom of conscience and freedom of religion, and is allowed to freely choose, hold, and disseminate religious and other beliefs and act in accordance with them. And so, by allowing the Chabad sect to freely act according to its extremist beliefs, the Constitution of the Russian Federation legalizes it as a legitimate religion and even a traditional one. The conclusion is obvious. The Constitution has recognized and legalized Jewish fascism, and those who oppose it are made criminals and enemies of the state. Article 29 of the Constitution of the Russian Federation prohibits religious superiority, meaning that this article prohibits us from preaching that Orthodox Christianity is superior to Judaism, Satanism, or any ideology that preaches fascism, and according to the laws of the Russian Federation, we are prohibited from saying that God is superior to the devil. This is blasphemy. And it was Putin who approved Chabad fascism with its racist and anti-human ideology at the legislative level, thereby legalizing crime in our country. By such actions, he pushed decent people into the impossibility of combining the fulfillment of God's law and the law of the Russian Federation. And he forced Orthodox believers to choose between either to be an accomplice to genocide and Jewish fascism and a traitor to the motherland, or to refuse to support Jewish fascism and to thus fall under the article of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation under which we are accused. Chabad is not just a religion. It is a terrorist political group hiding behind the screen of Judaism. Ber Lazar's words about a quiet revolution confirm this. Russia has seen many revolutions, but the most peaceful, quietest, and most effective was the revolution created by the emissaries of Chabad. These words were spoken in New York at a convention of emissaries of the Chabad movement. As President of the Russian Federation, Putin proposes and approves laws and is the head of the executive branch. Under these laws, Chabad fascist terrorists live freely in the Russian Federation, destroying the Russian nation according to Schneerson's plan. Putin openly meets with them, supports them in everything, talks about the great contribution of the Jewish community to the development of the state, and so on. That is, he contributes in every way to the development of fascism and the destruction of the Russian population in Triune Russia. According to Lazar, all the Chabad's plans are being implemented thanks to Putin personally. No Russian or Soviet leader has ever done as much for the Jews as Putin. In every respect, it's unprecedented. Nowadays, many mayors, regional leaders, and government ministers in Russia are Jewish. This has become the norm. After several meetings with Putin, Ariel Sharon repeatedly emphasized in confidential conversations with me that we Jews and Israel have our greatest friend in the Kremlin. Followers of Schneerson, Lazar, Boroda, and others who agree with his idea of destroying nations, primarily Russian Slavs, are for some reason not recognized as terrorists, while ordinary people who disagree with fascism and who actually defend their faith and their homeland are, according to many laws of the Russian Federation, considered terrorists and extremists. Article 205 of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation. This is a flagrant injustice, unprecedented in our country. Our Russian people defeated German fascism in its time, but today Jewish fascism reigns in Russia, which is much worse and more dangerous than German fascism, because it cunningly hides under the mask of traditional religion and influences all structures of power in Russia. Today, according to the laws of the Russian Federation, any patriotic word in defense of our homeland and the Orthodox faith, any word denouncing modern Jewish Satanists, is considered extremism and terrorism. When has this ever happened in our country? The Constitution of the Russian Federation is designed to protect human rights, primarily those of the indigenous Russian population, and the President is called upon to implement this fundamental law protecting people's rights. To this end, according to the Constitution and federal laws of the Russian Federation, the heads of all law enforcement agencies, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the Federal Security Service, the Foreign Intelligence Service, the Russian Guard, and the Investigative Committee report directly to Putin. According to Article 7 of the Constitution, the policy of the Russian Federation should be aimed at creating conditions that ensure a dignified life and the free development of the person. The President of the Russian Federation determines the main directions of the state's domestic and foreign policy. Article 80, Part 3. As the guarantor of the Constitution, he is responsible for ensuring respect for human rights and a compliance with the laws of the Russian Federation. And he must be aware of all the motives behind the adoption of various laws in the Russian Federation. In other words, the President has been given a lot of power, but he also has a lot of responsibility. To carry out his duties and responsibilities, Russian President Vladimir Putin has aides, among whom, as we can see, the vast majority are not representatives of the indigenous Russian population, but representatives of the Jewish people and the Jewish religion. And so, at the state level, the president and his Jewish assistants have created an entire repressive police system that oppresses human rights and is essentially aimed at ensuring that people have no rights at all, since the enforcement of criminal laws is enforced through the judicial system. Judges are appointed and dismissed by his decrees. They are completely dependent on the president, on the one who pays them and gives them work, and they don't pass judgments against the countless crimes of the authorities. In reality, we see from numerous facts that human and civil rights and their protection don't exist in the Russian Federation. In fact, the fascist ideology of Chabad aimed at the destruction of the indigenous Russian population in Russia is fully supported. The Constitution of the Russian Federation, monitored by the head of the Russian Federation, contains blasphemous, anti-Russian and contradictory provisions due to the fault of the current president. Anti-Russian and contradictory provisions cannot equally protect the rights of all people. It protects only the rights of Jews, while anyone from the indigenous Russian population who shows patriotism and love for their homeland finds that they no longer have any rights. And in all this situation, the direct relationship of the state to the rights and freedoms of people in Russia is precisely the policy of the first person of the Russian Federation. Therefore, I consider it imperative to question Vladimir Putin as a witness in this criminal case and ask him the following questions. Why did he legalize Jewish fascism in Russia? How should his actions be classified? Malicious or under pressure from Chabad? Why did he put people in such a difficult position? For in essence, with any choice regarding the issue of Jewish fascism, a person becomes a criminal under the laws of the Russian Federation. By agreeing with it, he becomes an accomplice with it, falling under the jurisdiction of the 1947 Nuremberg Tribunal. And by renouncing fascism, he falls under other articles of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation. Without questioning Putin VV as a witness in this criminal case, it is impossible to reveal the truth of the accusation, and a fair and objective resolution of the case depends on the clarification of these circumstances. According to Article 56 of the Criminal Procedure Code of the Russian Federation, a witness is a person who may be aware of any circumstances relevant to the investigation and resolution of a criminal case and who is summoned to give testimony. Based on the foregoing, in accordance with Article 56, 278 and 278.1 of the Criminal Procedure Code of the Russian Federation, I demand to issue a ruling to summon a new witness, Russian citizen VV Putin, residing at 210 Manezhnaya Street, Kremlin, Moscow, to the court hearing via video conferencing, to attach this petition to the case file.